There's a belief many leaders carry quietly, a belief that sounds reasonable, even responsible. Health is personal, health is optional. It's the idea that health sits outside the work, something you attend to when you have time, if things ease up, if everything else is handled. But here's the truth, and I want to offer it gently. When a leader treats their health as optional, the whole system feels it. Welcome back to the Leadership Longevity Podcast. I'm Elizabeth Hughes, and today we're exploring a myth that can feel confronting, not because it's dramatic, but because it is deeply human. Many leaders at every level have been taught to believe that their health is something they manage, privately, quietly, and behind the scenes. And here's the nuance that matters. Your health is not just personal, it's very personal. And that's why we don't like to talk about it sometimes. Because acknowledging health means acknowledging that leaders are human beings with limits, needs, and vulnerabilities. But here's the paradox. The very thing that makes your health personal is what makes it systemic. Because when something affects every leader, it becomes part of the architecture the whole organisation stands on. And yes, that includes the executive team and the board. Inside the leadership longevity ecosystem, this myth also sits within survival driver 1, the health depletion pattern. This survival driver fractures your internal layer, your adaptive conditions, part of the ecosystem that holds your biology, psychology, energy, your cognitive load, your emotional bandwidth, and your recovery cycles. At the center of that internal layer sits your high-value operating system, which we've talked about before: endurance, recovery, adaptation, and rhythm, the 4 events that determine how your internal rhythm stabilizes under load. When leaders treat health as personal or optional, they unintentionally signal that health is separate from leadership, a private matter, a side project, a perk. But in a regenerative leadership, health is infrastructure. Across this season, you'll hear me reference the ecosystem, the living system that holds your internal and external conditions. You don't need the full map yet. Don't worry, it's coming. But for now, you just need to know this. Minimizing your health fractures the system at its foundation, not through force, but through invisibility. The myth of health as a perk says, my health is mine. It doesn't affect anyone else. It tells you that your body is separate from your leadership, that your energy is irrelevant to your influence, that your clarity, steadiness, and presence are private matters. And here's the part that we don't often say out loud. This myth doesn't live just inside leaders, it lives inside organizations. When health is framed as personal, organizations quietly conclude it's optional. A bonus, a perk, something outside the core work of leadership. But leadership doesn't work that way. Leadership is relational. It is energetic. It is systemic. And when something is systemic, it becomes an organizational responsibility, not just a personal afterthought. So here's the lived reality, and I want to hold this with care. You're tired, but you keep going. You're foggy, but you push through. You're stretched, but you tell yourself it's fine. You'll rest later. You assume that your team can't see it. You assume it's not affecting anyone else. You assume you're containing it, but you're not. Because teams don't respond to what you say, they respond to what you signal. And your health is always signaling. This myth is seductive because it feels selfless. It feels like professionalism. It feels like maturity. It feels like not making things about you. And this belief shows up everywhere, from frontline supervisors to senior executives and even in the boardroom. Not because people don't care, but because talking about your health means talking about humanity. And that feels vulnerable. I once supported a leader, let's call them Jordan, who believed their health was personal. Jordan was brilliant, strategic, deeply committed to their team, but they had a habit of pushing through exhaustion quietly, privately, without ever naming it. One afternoon, Jordan came to a session frustrated. My team is anxious. They're second guessing themselves, they're making mistakes. I don't know what's going on. As they spoke, I noticed something. Jordan's sentences were shorter. Their breathing was shallow. The eyes were tired in a way that wasn't just physical. So I gently asked, "How are you?" They waved it off. "I'm fine. Just tired. But that's my issue, not theirs." Later that week, something happened. In a meeting, Jordan snapped. Not dramatically, but sharply enough that the room shifted and the team went quiet. People pulled back, the energy changed, and Jordan came to a next session and said quietly, "I think I scared them. I didn't mean to. I was just depleted." And that's when the truth landed. Jordan thought their health was personal, but their team had been feeling it for months. This wasn't failure, it was humanity. And it was a reminder that health is never contained. It always moves through the system. And I want to share something here, because this myth hasn't just lived in leaders I've coached, it's lived in me too. There was a season in my career where I decided that I would finally choose my health. Quietly, intentionally, not as a grand gesture, just as a grounded commitment to myself. And for a moment, it felt good, felt clear, aligned. But almost immediately, the system reacted. Not loudly, not aggressively, just subtly. A comment about timing, a raised eyebrow, a tightening in the room, the kind of shift you feel before you fully understand it. And I remember noticing their discomfort, not mine, theirs, and feeling something inside me wobble. Because the message underneath was unmistakable. Your health is fine as long as it doesn't inconvenience the work or me. And I'll be honest, I let go of the boundary. Not because I didn't care about my health at the time, but because the system didn't. And I'd been conditioned to take my cues from the system. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't catastrophic. It was just familiar. And eventually that clarity became impossible for me to ignore. So later, not in a crisis, but just in a quiet recognition that the way we were working wasn't built for human beings. And that's when my work began, not as a business plan, but as a reclamation. So then, when we look at the science, something important becomes clear. Your internal state isn't contained, it's communicated. Interoception is your brain's ability to sense what's happening inside you. Fatigue, tension, overwhelm, emotional strain. It's how you register your internal state before it spills outward. But when leaders treat health as optional, our interoception dulls. And when it dulls, a predictable pattern shows up. Emotional regulation drops, empathy narrows, irritability rises, and cues get misread. You react instead of responding, and your team feels the consequences before you do. The prefrontal cortex, the leadership's control center, the part of the brain that governs strategic thinking, decision-making, creativity, impulse control, empathy, And it is exquisitely sensitive to sleep loss, chronic stress, emotional overload, physical depletion. So when leaders minimize their health, the prefrontal cortex is the first to degrade. And when it goes, decisions become reactive, thinking becomes short-term, creativity collapses, and our emotional steadiness narrows. This isn't a personal failing. It's a neurobiological response. Another thing to consider too is that co-regulation, for example, is actually contagious. So humans regulate through each other. Teams unconsciously mirror the leader's pace, tone, boundaries, emotional steadiness, recovery habits. Again, it isn't psychology, it's neurobiology. So when a leader is depleted or runs hot, the system becomes more anxious. When a leader is steady, the system steadies. So health is contagious, and so is depletion. So your health is deeply personal, and that's exactly why it's systemic, because every leader at every level is a human being first. And when something is universal, it affects every leader, every body, every nervous system. It becomes part of the organizational architecture. So inside the ecosystem, this myth fractures our operating system, and specifically the sequence of recovery, adaptation, and rhythm. Endurance breaks this sequence through override, deferral breaks it through delay, and health as a perk breaks it through minimization. So 3 different distortions, one foundational fracture. And when the foundation fractures, the system compensates, usually through urgency, reactivity, and quiet depletion. So health is not a perk. It is a leadership infrastructure. Your health is part of the architecture of your organization stands on. It shapes your clarity, your steadiness, your influence, your relationships, your culture, your long arc value. So health isn't personal, it's structural. And when leaders treat health as part of the system, not as a private side project, everything stabilizes. Decision-making, team dynamics, culture, performance, and the long arc of the work. This is the shift from minimizing your health to honoring it as a core leadership responsibility. So a tiny experiment for our myth of health is a perk is to name one physical or emotional signal today out loud and respond to it. Perhaps a moment of tiredness, a tightening in your chest, a dip in patience, a need for a pause, just name it and respond. This is how interoception sharpens. This is how presence returns. And this is how leadership steadiness begins. A reflective question to consider is, where am I treating my health as personal when it is actually shaping my system? Let it be honest, let it be human. This question reveals the exact moment when personal becomes systemic. And ecosystem practice is where an insight becomes rhythm, where the tiny experiment interrupts the old pattern and the ecosystem practice builds a new one. So here's your practice for this myth. Choose one health behavior each week and treat it as a leadership responsibility, not a personal preference. A boundary, a recovery ritual, sleep commitment, a moment of stillness before a meeting, a pause before responding. Just one behavior, one commitment each week. This is how culture change, not through policy, but through presence. And this is how leaders shift from minimizing their health to modeling it. This is how the system learns what steadiness looks like in real time. Your health is the system's foundation. Build it deliberately. Releasing the myth that health is a perk feels like reclaiming the truth that your health isn't optional, it's structural. It's the moment you understand that caring for your body and mind isn't indulgent, but intelligent. It feels like your foundation is strengthening. Your thinking is sharpening and your leadership becomes more grounded because you're no longer treating health as an afterthought. It's stabilizing, clarifying, and deeply empowering. The kind of leadership built on solid ground rather than borrowed energy. In our next episode, we're exploring the myth of self-sacrifice, the belief that good leadership requires giving more than you have. If myth 3 is a myth of minimizing, myth 4 is the myth of martyrdom, and it quietly shapes the way leaders trade themselves for the work. I'll meet you there.